Come, settle in, and let the world outside grow quiet. Allow the rhythm of your own breathing to become the only clock you follow. We are going on a journey tonight, not across land or through the stars, but down. Down into the deep, dark cradle of the world, into the vast and silent majesty of the ocean. Imagine yourself suspended in the water, a place of no weight and no hurry. The sunlight from the world above begins to fade, dappling the surface in a brilliant, fractured mosaic, but here, just a little way down, it becomes a soft, diffused glow. The sharp blues and greens of the surface world melt into a deep, velvety indigo. The sounds of the shore, of the wind and the gulls, are gone, replaced by a profound and ancient quiet, punctuated only by the slow, distant clicks of unseen life and the gentle, rhythmic pulse of the currents. You are descending, slowly, gently, through layers of time and temperature, through the sunlit zone, teeming with vibrant life, past the twilight realm where strange and wondrous creatures begin to glow with their own internal light, and further still, into the midnight abyss, a place of crushing pressure and eternal darkness, illuminated only by the brief, ghostly flares of bioluminescence. It is a world so alien, so seemingly hostile to our form of life, that we have explored more of the moon's surface than we have our own ocean floor. And yet, it is from here that all life on this planet once emerged. It is a place of memory, of beginnings. It is down here, in this immense and patient darkness, that we hold our greatest secrets. Now, let us entertain a thought, a gentle what-if that has echoed through human consciousness for over 2,000 years. It is a question born from a story, a whisper from the ancient world that has refused to fade into silence. What if, somewhere in this vast, uncharted territory, beneath the silt of millennia and the slow dance of abyssal plains, something is waiting? Not a monster, not a geological anomaly, but a memory made of stone and metal, of layout and design. What if the most famous of all lost worlds was not a fanciful tale, a philosopher's allegory, or a simple myth? What if Atlantis was real? Let that idea settle, not as a fantastic claim demanding proof, but as a soft, speculative possibility. Imagine that the story told by Plato was not an invention, but an inheritance, a fragment of a memory, passed down through generations, across languages and empires, a true story that had become so old, so worn by the telling, that it began to feel like a dream. We so often draw a hard line between fact and myth, between history and story. But what if that line is more like a coastline, constantly shifting, with the tides of time blurring the distinction? What if myths are not lies, but rather the vessels that carry the deepest truths, the emotional and cultural memories of events so large, so traumatic, that they could only be processed and preserved through the language of legend? The story of a great flood, for instance, exists in countless cultures across the globe. Are they all fictions, or are they the echoes of a shared memory, of rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age? Perhaps the story of Atlantis is such an echo. The memory of a civilization so brilliant, so advanced for its time, that its sudden and total disappearance could only be explained as an act of the gods. A society that existed at the very edge of recorded history, whose light was extinguished before its full story could be written, leaving behind only a single, haunting whisper. So let us continue our descent, not as treasure hunters or adventurers, but as quiet observers, as dreamers, and let us imagine what it would mean, and what it would look like, if that whisper were true. Let us drift down into the patient dark and listen for the echo of a city that sleeps beneath the sea. The story, as we know it, begins not in the depths of the ocean, but in the heart of ancient Athens, with the great philosopher Plato. In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, he introduces us to this incredible island empire. He presents it not as his own creation, but as a history, a true account passed down to him. Imagine the story as a living thing, a delicate, shimmering thread woven through time. It begins its journey much earlier, with the Athenian statesman Solon, one of the 7 sages of Greece. During his travels in Egypt, around 590 BC, he is said to have visited the city of Sais, where the priests of the goddess Neith shared their sacred records with him. These priests, keepers of histories that stretched back thousands of years beyond Greek memory, spoke of a mighty power that had once emerged from the Atlantic Ocean. They described an island, larger than Libya and Asia combined, that was the heart of a great and wonderful empire. From this island, its kings ruled over other islands and parts of the continents of both Europe and Africa. They spoke of a prehistoric war between this power, Atlantis, and the ancient, Proto-Athenians who, in a feat of heroic valor, stood against the vast empire and saved the Mediterranean world from subjugation. And then, The priests told a story of a terrible cataclysm. In a single, dreadful day and night of misfortune, violent earthquakes and floods occurred, and the island of Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea. Solon, it is said, intended to write an epic poem about this history, but old age prevented him. The story was instead passed down through his family, from Solon to his relative Dropides, to his son Critias the Elder, and finally to Plato's own contemporary, Critias the Younger, who recounts it in the dialogue. Think of that journey. A story carried from the stone archives of an Egyptian temple, across the sea to Greece, held within a single family for generations, and finally written down by a philosopher, not as a central thesis of his work, but almost as an aside, a fascinating piece of history to frame a larger discussion about ideal societies. It's this specific, detailed lineage that gives the story its tantalizing texture of truth. Plato is not just telling a story, he is telling us how he received the story. He gives it a provenance, a history of its own. He describes the city in astonishing detail. It was built upon a mountain, with a palace at its center, surrounded by 3 concentric rings of water and 2 of land, like a giant target. These rings were connected by massive canals, wide enough for ships to sail through, leading all the way to the sea. He speaks of bridges and tunnels, of advanced engineering that allowed them to manage the flow of water and create a bustling, protected harbor. He describes temples roofed in silver and adorned with gold, and walls covered in a mysterious, red-glowing metal he calls orichalcum, which he says was second only to gold in value. He speaks of hot and cold springs that provided water for elaborate baths, for both royalty and common citizens. He paints a picture of a land of immense natural wealth, with dense forests, abundant wildlife, including elephants, and fields that produce 2 harvests a year. It sounds fantastical, a true utopia. But let us pause and look closer. Could these incredible descriptions be interpretations of real phenomena? Could the concentric rings be the natural structure of a collapsed volcanic caldera, reshaped by intelligent design? The island of Santorini, or Thera, is a real-world example of such a formation, the remnant of a colossal eruption that destroyed the Minoan civilization. Could orichalcum be a natural alloy, like the gold-silver mix known as electrum, or perhaps a polished form of copper or bronze that shone with a fiery brilliance in the sun? The details, while magnificent, are not entirely beyond the scope of what a highly organized, wealthy, and ingenious Bronze Age culture could achieve. The story is a ghost, a whisper from a time before our histories began, and like any ghost, it is both terrifying and beautiful, a hint of a life that was lived and lost, a world that vanished beneath the waves, leaving us with nothing but a name and a legend. Let us now allow our imaginations to drift backward in time, to before the cataclysm, before the silence. Let us try to see this place not as a ruin, but as it was, in its full and vibrant life. We are there, standing on a hill overlooking the city. The air is warm, carrying the scent of salt from the sea and the sweet fragrance of blossoms from the meticulously tended gardens that cascade down the terrace slopes. The sun is high, and the city below is a breathtaking sight. It is a city born of a perfect marriage between nature and design. The concentric canals, Plato's rings of water, are not stagnant moats but shimmering, living waterways. They gleam with a brilliant turquoise light, reflecting the cloudless sky. Ships with single, square sails and hulls painted in bright colors glide silently along these channels, carrying goods from the outer world into the heart of the metropolis. You see merchants from Egypt, from Phoenicia, from the distant shores of Europe, all drawn to this hub of commerce and culture. The rings of land are lush and green, covered in sacred groves of trees and open parks where people gather. The architecture is unlike anything you have ever seen. It is not heavy or imposing, but elegant and powerful, as if it grew from the very rock of the island. The buildings are made of white, black, and red stone, quarried from the island itself, arranged in intricate patterns. There are no fortifying walls of aggression on the outer rings. The sea itself is their defense and their embrace. The city doesn't fight its environment, it dances with it. As we move closer, into the city itself, the sounds envelop you. It is not a quiet place, but the noise is harmonious. The primary sound is the gentle, constant murmur of water. It flows not just in the great canals but in smaller channels that run alongside the streets, cooling the air and carrying away waste. The sound of fountains is everywhere, a liquid music that forms the city's heartbeat. You hear the chatter of voices in a language that is fluid and melodic, the ringing of a stonemason's hammer, the distant call of a seabird. And you see the light. The famous orichalcum, whatever it was, is used to plate the walls of the innermost citadel. It doesn't glitter harshly like gold, but seems to absorb and re-emit the sunlight with a soft, warm, reddish glow, as if the walls themselves are breathing light. In the center of it all stands the great temple to Poseidon, the god of the sea, who they believe gifted them this island. Its scale is immense, but its design is one of graceful balance. It feels sacred, a place of deep reverence for the awesome power that surrounds them. The people of this city move with a sense of purpose and calm. They are seafarers, astronomers, engineers, artists. Their skin is tanned by the sun, their eyes accustomed to looking at distant horizons. They seem to possess a deep understanding of their world, a confidence born not of arrogance, but of competence. This is not a city of magic or impossible technology. It is a city built by human hands and human ingenuity, a civilization that reached a pinnacle of harmonious existence with its environment, a masterpiece of Bronze Age culture that understood the rhythms of the tides, the patterns of the stars, and the art of building a society that was as beautiful as it was functional. It is a place of light, of water, of life. And for now, in this moment of our shared imagination, it is real, it is thriving, and the thought of its demise seems utterly impossible. What kind of people would build such a city? What would they believe? To understand the mind of Atlantis, we must understand their relationship with the sea. For us, living on vast continents, the ocean is often a boundary, an edge, a place to be crossed. For the Atlanteans, it was the center of everything. It was their home, their provider, their protector, and their greatest teacher. Their science, therefore, would not have been a science of conquering nature, but of understanding and harmonizing with it. Imagine their astronomers. They would not have just mapped the stars for navigation, though they would have been masters of that craft, able to sail further and more accurately than any of their contemporaries. They would have also mapped the stars to understand their connection to the ocean's tides. They would have seen the subtle pull of the moon and the sun not as an abstract gravitational force, but as a cosmic breath, the slow, deep inhale and exhale of the planet's lifeblood. Their calendars would be lunar, their festivals tied to the solstices and the equinoxes, but also to the king tides and the neap tides. Their understanding of mathematics and geometry would have been profound, born from the practical necessities of naval architecture, canal construction, and the precise celestial observations needed for long-range voyages. They would have understood wave mechanics, currents, and weather patterns with an intimacy that we, with all our satellites and sensors, have perhaps lost. Their philosophy would have been deeply interwoven with this oceanic perspective. They would see the world not as a collection of static objects, but as a system of flows, cycles, and constant change. The sea would be their ultimate metaphor. The surface, with its storms and calms, would represent the transient nature of daily life, the emotions that come and go like waves. But the deep, the silent, crushing dark below, would represent a deeper reality, a collective unconscious, the source from which all things emerge and to which all things return. Their concept of time would be less linear and more cyclical, like the turning of the tides. Their art would reflect this. You would see the spiral motif everywhere, in their pottery, their architecture, their jewelry. The spiral representing the whirlpool, the galaxy, the shell of the nautilus, the unfolding of life itself. Their music would be rhythmic, percussive, echoing the break of waves on a shore, and melodic, with long, flowing phrases like the currents of the deep. Their society, at least in its golden age, might have been structured to reflect this natural harmony. Plato describes a confederation of 10 kings, ruling in concert, meeting to deliberate on common affairs. Perhaps this was a system designed to create balance, to prevent any one power from becoming too dominant, a political ecosystem as balanced as a coral reef. They would have been a people who knew their place in the universe, not as masters, but as participants in a grand, cosmic dance. They were wealthy, yes, and powerful, but their greatest strength was their knowledge, their deep, intuitive, and scientific understanding of the rhythms of the planet. And it is this very intimacy with the forces of nature that makes their end so profoundly tragic. They understood the power of the ocean better than anyone. They revered it. But they could not have known that another, even greater power, was sleeping restlessly beneath their very feet. Every golden age must end. Every tide that comes in must go out. This is the fundamental rhythm of the universe, a truth the Atlanteans would have understood well. But they could not have prepared for the turning of this tide. Plato's account speaks of their decline, how their divine nature became diluted with mortal admixture, how they became filled with avarice and pride. This may be a moralistic gloss added by later storytellers, a way to make sense of the senseless, to give a reason for the tragedy. For the truth is that nature needs no reason. The planet on which we live is a dynamic, ever-changing entity. Its surface is a thin, fragile crust floating on a sea of molten rock. The continents drift, mountains rise, and the seafloor spreads. It is a slow, geological dance that usually happens on a timescale far beyond human perception. But sometimes, the rhythm of that dance breaks into a violent tremor. For the people of Atlantis, the end did not come as a slow decline, but as a sudden, catastrophic rupture in the fabric of their world. Let us imagine that final day. It would have begun like any other. The sun rising over the eastern sea, casting its first golden light on the shimmering walls of the city. The canals busy with the morning traffic, the markets coming to life. But there would have been signs, subtle at first, for those who knew how to read them. The water in the wells might have turned cloudy. The animals, more sensitive to the deep vibrations of the earth, would have been restless, the birds taking to the sky in agitated flocks, the elephants trumpeting with a strange, mournful cry. Then would come the first tremor. Not a violent shaking, but a deep, resonant shudder that seemed to come from the very bones of the island. A long, low groan from the earth. A moment of stunned silence would fall over the city, every conversation stopping, every head turning to listen. Then, another. Stronger this time. A few stones might fall from a high wall. A crack might appear in a paved street. Panic would begin to set in, a low hum of fear beneath the city's normal sounds. The priests in the temple of Poseidon would be making offerings, chanting prayers to appease their god, whom they would believe was angry. But this was not the anger of a god. It was the indifferent mechanics of geology. The island of Atlantis, a jewel born of volcanic fire, was about to be reclaimed by it. The mountain at the island center, the one on which the citadel was built, was not just a mountain. It was a volcano. One that had been dormant for so long it was thought to be extinct, a sleeping giant. And now, it was waking up. The sky would begin to darken, not with clouds, but with a fine ash, raining down like a grey, gritty snow. The air would grow thick with the smell of sulfur. And then, the final, terrible convulsion. A tectonic plate slips, a magma chamber ruptures. The earth does not just shake, it rips apart. Buildings of stone, built to last for eternity, would collapse into dust. The concentric canals, marvels of engineering, would be torn asunder, the water boiling and churning. The great mountain would explode in a cataclysmic eruption, a pyroclastic flow of superheated gas and ash incinerating everything in its path. And as the heart of the island collapses, a void is created, and the ocean, the very entity the Atlanteans revered, would rush in to fill it. A tsunami of unimaginable scale, a wall of water hundreds of feet high, would wash over the remains of the island, scouring it clean, dragging the ruins and the dead down into the newly formed abyss. In a single day and a single night of misfortune, as the ancient story tells us, a civilization, a culture, a world, was utterly and completely erased. And then, there was only silence, and the calm, indifferent sea. In the wake of such an event, the world is irrevocably changed. The sky for hundreds, even thousands of miles away would have been dark for days, even weeks, choked with volcanic ash. The sun would have been a dim, red orb. A fine layer of grey dust would have settled on everything, a funereal blanket covering the known world. For the ships at sea, the lucky few who were far enough away to survive the initial blast and the subsequent tsunami, it would have been a vision of hell. They would have seen the pillar of smoke and fire on the horizon, heard the sound that would have echoed around the globe, and then faced the towering wave that came rushing out of the chaos. Some would have survived, their ships battered, their crews traumatized, to bring back a tale of impossible destruction. They would speak of the sea boiling, of the sky catching fire, of the day turning into night. Back in the Mediterranean, in Egypt, in the early cities of Greece and the Levant, the effects would have been profound. The tsunamis would have crashed into their coastlines, destroying ports and villages. The ash cloud would have caused crop failures, leading to famine. And a major trading partner, a source of exotic goods, metals, and knowledge, would have simply vanished. All contact would be lost. Expeditions sent to investigate would find nothing. No island. No people. Just an empty, turbulent stretch of ocean where a great nation once stood. This is where history ends and myth begins. The scattered survivors, washed ashore on distant lands or picked up by passing ships, would have had no way to explain what happened in geological terms. They would have only their terror, their grief, and their fragmented memories. They would say their home was destroyed by the gods, that Poseidon himself, in a great rage, shook the earth and swallowed their island. The story would be told and retold, around campfires, in the courts of kings, in the quiet temples of priests. With each telling, the details would shift. The kings of Atlantis would become demigods. Their advanced engineering would become magic. Their wealth would become limitless. The historical event, too vast and terrible to be contained by simple fact, would crystallize into a powerful legend. It would become a cautionary tale about hubris, a story about a proud people who angered the gods and were punished for it. This is how memory works on a civilizational scale. The sharp edges of trauma are worn smooth over generations, polished into the shape of a story that is easier to carry. The priests of Sais in Egypt, with their long and meticulous historical records, may have preserved a more factual version of the account, the one they shared with Solon. They remembered the name of the island, its location beyond the Pillars of Hercules, and the nature of its sudden demise. But for the rest of the world, Atlantis became a ghost, a whisper on the wind, a half-remembered dream of a paradise lost. And the ocean, the great, silent accomplice to the cataclysm, held the evidence in its deepest, darkest vaults, slowly, patiently burying the last remnants of the city under layers of silt and the quiet falling of marine snow. The world moved on. New empires rose and fell. But the story, the fragile, shimmering thread, survived. Let us now return to the present, and to our quiet descent. Thousands of years have passed since that terrible day. We are sinking through the cold, black water, far below the reach of the sun. The pressure here is immense, a weight that would crush any ordinary vessel, a force that has flattened and compressed the ruins of our imagined city. We have reached the abyssal plain, a vast, seemingly featureless expanse of mud and ooze. But our journey is not over. We are moving towards a place where the flat terrain rises into a series of strange, concentric ridges, a formation that still holds the faint, geometric echo of its artificial origins. This is it, the final resting place of Atlantis. It is not a pristine, sunken city waiting to be discovered. It is a ghost, a skeleton, a suggestion of what once was. The slow, relentless work of the deep has transformed it utterly. What were once proud towers are now crumbling mounds, their sharp edges softened by millennia of sediment. The great temple of Poseidon is a collapsed ruin, its mighty columns lying like the bones of a fallen giant. The walls of Orichalcum have long since been corroded, their legendary glow extinguished, now just a dark stain on the seafloor. Yet, it is not a dead place. It is teeming with a different kind of life, the strange and beautiful life of the abyss. The ruins have become a reef, a foundation for a new and alien ecosystem. Giant tube worms, with their bright red plumes, grow in thick clusters where public squares once were. Pale, translucent corals, delicate as spun glass, have attached themselves to the broken pediments of a palace. Anemones, like ghostly flowers, wave their tentacles in the slow, inexorable currents. Strange fish, blind and pale, navigate the ghostly streets, their forms illuminated by the eerie, fleeting lights of bioluminescent organisms. A slow-moving sea cucumber crawls over a carved stone that might once have been part of a frieze depicting kings and gods. A deep-sea octopus, with its intelligent, ancient eyes, makes its home in what was once the treasury. This is the ultimate reclamation. The city is no longer a human artifact. It has been fully integrated into the deep-sea environment. It has become part of nature again. The bioluminescence is the only light here now. It pulses and flashes in the dark, a cold, silent firework display. A school of lanternfish drifts through the skeletal remains of a great bridge, their tiny lights creating a moving constellation in the blackness. A predator, something with a vast, tooth-filled jaw and a glowing lure, stalks the shadows of the collapsed citadel. There is a profound, haunting beauty to this scene. It is a testament to the unstoppable power of time and the tenacity of life. The city's human story is over, its pride and its glory forgotten. But in its decay, it has given birth to a new world, a silent, glowing garden in the crushing dark. It is a quiet, contemplative place, a monument not to human achievement, but to the endless cycle of creation, destruction, and renewal. Is it possible that such a place truly exists? While the story of a single, great island empire disappearing overnight remains a legend, the core elements of the tale, a sophisticated civilization, a catastrophic natural disaster, a sudden disappearance, are not without precedent in the real world. History and geology offer us tantalizing echoes, real-world events that might have been the seeds from which the myth of Atlantis grew. The most famous and widely discussed candidate is the Minoan civilization, which flourished on the island of Crete and surrounding Aegean islands during the Bronze Age. The Minoans were a remarkable people. They were not a warlike empire, but a thalassocracy, a civilization whose power was based on sea trade. Their art was vibrant and full of life, depicting peaceful scenes, athletic events like bull leaping, and a deep reverence for nature. They built magnificent palaces, like the one at Knossos, with advanced plumbing, beautiful frescoes, and a complex, labyrinthine layout. They were, by all accounts, a highly advanced, wealthy, and sophisticated culture. And then, around 1600 BC, their world was shattered. The nearby island of Thera, now known as Santorini, which was a Minoan outpost, suffered one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history. The eruption blew the center of the island apart, creating the caldera we see today, and triggered colossal tsunamis that would have devastated the northern coast of Crete, the heart of the Minoan civilization. Their fleet would have been destroyed, their coastal towns and farms washed away. The resulting volcanic winter would have led to widespread famine. Within a few generations, their unique culture vanished, absorbed by the more militaristic Mycenaeans from mainland Greece. Could this be the event that Plato's story remembers? The timeline is different. Plato speaks of 9,000 years before his time, while the Minoan collapse was about 900 years before Solon, but numbers in ancient texts are notoriously fluid. The description of a powerful island civilization destroyed by a cataclysm matches perfectly. Even Plato's description of the city, with its access to red, white, and black stone, matches the geology of Thera. Perhaps the story of the Minoan collapse was passed down, its scale and age growing with each telling, until it reached the Egyptian priests who told it to Solon. But the Minoans are not the only echo. All around the world, we are discovering submerged landscapes and lost habitations. Off the coast of India, in the Gulf of Cambay, sonar has mapped the outlines of two large cities, with geometric structures and dredging samples that have yielded artifacts and carbon-dated materials to be thousands of years old, submerged when sea levels rose after the last ice age. In the North Sea, between Britain and Denmark, lies Doggerland, a vast plain that was once home to Mesolithic hunters, now completely underwater. We know that coastlines are not permanent. We know that civilizations can and do collapse suddenly. Perhaps Atlantis is not a specific place. Perhaps it is a composite memory, a name we give to all the lost chapters of the human story that have been swallowed by the sea. The what-if then shifts from was this one island real, to how many other stories, how many other worlds, lie forgotten beneath the waves. The search for Atlantis becomes a symbol for the exploration of our own deep, mysterious past, a recognition that the history we know is just the surface of a much vaster, darker, and more wondrous ocean of time. So why, after more than 2 millennia, does this story still hold such a powerful grip on our imagination? We have mapped the globe, plumbed the ocean depths, and found no great sunken continent. And yet, we keep searching. We keep telling the story. We keep wondering. The reason, perhaps, is that the story of Atlantis has become more than just a story about a lost city. It has become a story about us. It is a perfect, polished mirror, reflecting our own deepest hopes and fears. In the image of a utopian Atlantis, a society of peace, wisdom, and advanced knowledge, we see a reflection of our own aspirations. We see the hope for a better world, a longing for a lost golden age, a belief that humanity was once, and could be again, something nobler, more harmonious, more connected to the world around us. It represents the dream of a perfect society, a paradise on earth, and the search for it is a search for the blueprint of that paradise, a secret key to solving our own problems. It is a story that whispers to us that we have the potential for greatness, because it is already in our ancestral memory. But the mirror has a dark side. In the story of the cataclysm, of the city's sudden and total destruction, we see a reflection of our deepest anxieties. The story of Atlantis is the ultimate cautionary tale. In Plato's version, the Atlanteans were destroyed because of their hubris, their greed, and their lust for power. They became corrupt, and so the gods, or nature, struck them down. As we look at our own world, with its looming environmental crises, its unsustainable consumption, and its ever-present threat of self-destruction, the myth of Atlantis feels chillingly relevant. It is a stark reminder of the fragility of civilization. It tells us that no matter how advanced, how powerful, or how permanent we believe our own world to be, it can all be swept away in an instant. The ground beneath our feet is not as solid as it seems. The story forces us to confront the unsettling idea that our own sprawling cities, our own technological marvels, our own global civilization, could one day become a myth for a future generation. a half-remembered legend of a people who grew too proud and were swallowed by the rising tides they themselves had set in motion. The enduring power of Atlantis, then, lies in this duality. It is both an inspiration and a warning. It is a myth that contains a profound psychological truth, that within our own human nature lies the capacity for both utopian creation and apocalyptic self-destruction. The search for the lost city is, in the end, a search for ourselves, an attempt to understand the best and worst of what we can be. And so, our journey into the deep comes to a close. Let your consciousness begin its slow ascent, rising from the imagined ruins on the abyssal plain, back up through the crushing dark. You drift past the strange, glowing creatures of the midnight zone, their brief, ghostly lights bidding you a silent farewell. You rise further, into the twilight world, as the impenetrable blackness softens into a deep, hazy indigo. The pressure lessens. And then, you see it, a faint, shimmering ceiling far above. It grows brighter and brighter, the beautiful, life-giving light of the sun, filtering down, calling you home. You break the surface, emerging from the cool silence of the deep into the warm air of the waking world. The journey is over. But what have we brought back with us? We have brought back the quiet wonder of a possibility. Whether Atlantis was a real place, a garbled memory of the Minoan collapse, a composite legend of many submerged lands, or purely a philosopher's invention, its reality is no longer the most important question. Its power is not geological, but narrative. The story is the artifact that has survived. The truth that the myth of Atlantis holds is a human truth. It speaks to our enduring fascination with the unknown, our yearning for a connection to a deeper past, and our recognition of the awesome, untamable power of the natural world. It reminds us that we are all island dwellers. We live on a small, solid island of the present moment, surrounded by a vast and deep ocean of time that stretches back into a forgotten past and forward into an unknowable future. The story of Atlantis is a call to humility. It reminds us to not take our island for granted, to understand the forces that swirl around us, to build with wisdom and to live with grace. It encourages us to be explorers, not just of the outer world, but of the inner one, to dive into the depths of our own shared history and consciousness, to find the treasures of wisdom that lie buried there. The mystery of Atlantis is not a puzzle to be solved, but a space to be inhabited. A quiet, contemplative space where our imaginations can be free. It is a place to wonder, to dream, and to feel a profound sense of connection to all the generations who have looked out at the sea and felt that same sense of awe, that same shiver of the sublime. The silence of the deep ocean is not an empty silence. It is filled with memory, with potential, with the slow, patient rhythm of the planet itself. And perhaps, by learning to listen to that silence, we can better hear the whispers of our own past and the quiet warnings about our future. Let the gentle waves of this thought carry you now into a place of rest, of peace, and of deep, quiet wonder. Let the story settle, like silt on the ocean floor, becoming a part of the landscape of your dreams. And sleep well.